Welcome to the 167th broadcast of the T-ROH show. It's going to be part two. I'm going to go a little bit further into the law of nations. But first, I want to bring some things up. I got into a comment, and it actually, the comment ended up, it's being a rude comment, but of course, but it brought us in a completely different direction. Now, I'm going to just show you what the comment, not the comment itself, it was in reference to the use of a word, okay? And that was minute instead of minute. Okay, so it's a minute detail of the various agreements made between particular nations, or a minute detail of its particulars does not, instead of minute. Well, they're both spelled the exact same way. So I want to explain some things about this particular thing. When I'm reading something, there's a part of my brain that is trying to pull on some sort of personal experience that I've had so that I can stop and say, you'll notice I stop in certain paragraphs and say, now see, this is what we do over here, or bring it to today. You have to bring what's written here. This was written in 1758. Long time ago. 1764, I think, was when it was published. Long time ago. So the wording's going to be a little different. The speech is going to be a little different. It's going to be a little dry, and in some cases, boring. So you have to make it interesting first, because you're speaking to over 1 million people. Put yourself in my shoes. You're speaking to over 1 million people, and you're trying to bring or pull on some experiences that I've had in the past in building nations and things like that, that will possibly help people understand. Now, my definition of stupid is somebody that does the same thing, and they know better that it doesn't work or it's destructive to themselves. That's how I see it. Now, stupid may mean something different to other people. So when I say, man, that is so stupid, what I'm looking at is somebody that's just basically beating themselves in the head with a book or a bat, or their head against the wall, and then they can't figure out why they're bleeding, and they don't try to change their behavior because they want to look superior. The comment was literally, oh, it was a misuse of the word of minute instead of minute. Okay, no problem. That's all you heard? Out of all this, out of the many pages that were read to you, that's all you saw. And I'm thinking, wow, okay. So what we have to do is realize that no one's perfect. And put yourself out there. Put yourself out there, let 1 million people listen to you. And be willing to make mistakes in front of them. Try that. Just try that once and see how that feels. I've had other people try it, actually in my presence, and they crumble. They just go blank. Okay, and it's very difficult to do. So just realize, look at the spirit of what's going on. And if I'm misusing a word like that, it's not because I don't know. I'm reading, and I'm also thinking at the same time, how can I take this paragraph and help and reach as many people as I possibly can? So I might have little mistakes like that. So realize that. It's just, I'm not perfect. And I fully admit that, not perfect. Okay, and perfection is not the communist way of perfection, which is everything must be exactly right when it's right. In other words, it becomes non-human. Because people who are communist detest human mistakes and human weaknesses. That's why they kill so many people. Or they look at their mistakes as human weaknesses or as weaknesses themselves. And that's the way it is on a lot of these programs. So I'll get comments like that, and I just kind of shake my head, going, "You missed the whole thing of what I'm trying to actually tell you. Here, I'm trying to help the country and put it back together here. Let's not dilly dally on the word minute or minute or how it's used in a sentence. Seriously, let's move on. You know what it meant. Everybody else know what it meant. I'm reading it, and plus, I don't want to sit and if you've ever heard people read and they go, certain maxims and customs consecrated by long use and observed by, you hear that. And these are people that you've known for a long time, but you think, wow, man, you really need to make that a little smoother so it's easier to listen to. Just smooth out your reading, and then you're not trying to read for you, okay? Or somebody's not trying to help you while they're trying to listen to you. Plus, they're sitting there, it's like, oh man, I could be out going doing something else, way more productive. And if this guy just read faster, we get through this a lot quicker. Okay, a lot of people start thinking that. So, give a man a break. By the way, thanks for the donations, folks. There was, I think we had 2 of them, and any little bit helps. You would not believe. Any little bit helps, and it doesn't go to things that are destructive. Okay, like booze, and I used to get a lot of comments about hearing people. I was smoking in the background, or they hear my lighter. Well, I haven't smoked since last June, and I don't want to go through the withdrawals again. The second day was hell, folks. It was hell, but it only lasted 5 hours. And with the help of the Holy Spirit and the willingness of not wanting to do that anymore, I'm hoping I can kick the habit for the rest of my life, because I really don't like it. So let's move on. We're going to go to the second part of this, because I was just going to go to the first chapter. Hold on one second. Okay, we're at the Law of Nations, Book 1 of Nations Considered in Themselves. Okay, now this is the funny part about this. I just want to show you how simple things can be, or how easily things can be misunderstood based on how something's used in a sentence. Like, it'll say, "Thou shalt not want." So people used that, or talked that, or saw that, and heard that statement, "Thou shalt not want." It was more of a command. It was written in such a way as far as the want was concerned, when in fact that was actually used incorrectly in a sentence, because what they're saying is perfection in the Law of Nations, which came from the Bible, by the way. They're saying that wanting is imperfection, and when you don't want for anything, like food, water, shelter, friends, family, children, all those things, that you have reached perfection. And that's what it means. So that's what perfection means in the scriptures. So obviously, back in the day when this was written, somebody really understood what want meant, or what perfection was at the time. It didn't mean, and basically because of that misunderstanding as to what want is and what it means and how it's perceived, it created monks. And because they misunderstood that, so they lived their whole life under a perception that material things were bad in this world. It created a whole movement like that for the misunderstanding of want, which caused a lot of people to not want to go to the Most High. And because they wanted material things, they went to the devil pops in and says, "Oh, you can have all this," which is not his anyways. And he didn't create it and had nothing to do with it. You can have all this if you just sell your soul to him. And that's what caused the whole satanic Luciferian movement. Just with the misunderstanding of the word, and or the a lack of perception as to what it is of the word want. Can you imagine that if the true meaning literally hit people right square in the face and said, "Well, wait a minute, it just means that I don't want for anything. I'm perfectly content." How about if it said, "If you follow me, you'll want for nothing," meaning Yahushua? How about if it said that? It'd be a whole lot different. But somebody turned that into a command and took somebody's rebellious nature and turned it against them. So in the Law of Nations, it explains to you what want means. and what perfection is and what imperfection is in that sense of the word. Not perfection as in I pronounced the word correctly or I used it correctly in a sentence. It's I don't really want for anything. I'm perfectly content with what I have. And just because I may want a car or brand new this or brand new that doesn't mean I'm evil or that I'm going to imperfection and all that. That was twisted under the word want. Just thought I'd bring it up to possibly bring some, bring forward some personal experience to help others realize that just because you are filled with the Holy Spirit doesn't mean that you have to give up material things. That's not what he's saying at all. He's just saying that you're going to have so much you're not going to want for anything. And I'm saying, cool, good to go. So, anyways, the Law of Nations, Book 1 of Nations Considered in Themselves. We started here last time. Now, keep in mind, folks, if I mispronounce or say something or use the word incorrectly in these sentences, just understand that I'm also thinking in the background, how can I take on or pull to my on my personal experiences to help you understand this better. Okay, so let's all give each other a break. Let's not worry about left and right. Let's not worry about communism, socialism, and republic and all these other things. Let's just try to understand together what they're trying to tell us and what is being said here, because this book was important enough that a whole nation recognizes it and that it is the law that we go by as far as offenses against the law of nations. It was also done under the Articles of Confederation, of which we are a part of now. Where I mean, at least my person is under that, under the law of it's not under the Constitution. Let's just put it that way. All right, a nation or a state, as has been said in the beginning of this work, a body politic. Okay, now what was a body politic? And we have proof of this in earlier T-ROHs. Some people got together and they all agreed upon something. And they all signed it and said, okay, this is going to be our social compact with each other. Now, in order for us to communicate with the rest of the world, we're going to have to create a constitution in a state and go into politics and get into international relations. That's what that means. Just that one sentence right there. A nation or a state, as has been said in the beginning of this work, a body politic or a society of men united together for the purpose of promoting their mutual safety and advantage by their combined strength. That's all it is. And that needs to happen. So when you have people in a body politic and they're all a part of the same social compact, the social compact is that which restricts the statutes that are created within the legislature. You don't ever have this problem with what Virginia is doing, ever. Because you can put them on trial, you can impeach them as being a part of it and a signatory to it, to the Constitution of Virginia and the Social Compact of Virginia, which right now doesn't exist. So therefore the Constitution can't exist. And therefore the state is sitting in trust with us. That's where it sits until these particular conditions are met. Without a social compact, there is no way to restrict that legislature. So they're just going to go hog wild, which is what they're doing now. You have a communist regime working under world communism, and the world communists knew what they were doing. They knew there was no social compact. They knew what they were doing. They're taking advantage of it. And they're taking advantage of the ignorance of the people. Okay? So from every design that induces a number of men to form a society, which has its common interests. So from the very design that induces a number of men to form a society, the design, they're talking about natural law. People have a natural will to come together. They'll all stick together. Some people call it a gang. Okay, but people group up, and that's why they call it peaceably assemble. Okay, which has its common interest, and which is to act in concert. It is necessary, in other words, when they're all going to act together, it is necessary that should be established a public authority to order and direct what is to be done by each in relation to the end of the association. Okay, so they're saying it's there or not. This political authority is the sovereignty. It's just collectively come together. They create the sovereignty, and the one that sits there, what do they do? They call him the sovereign, not him, his office. Because each man or woman can actually take that office and use it to resolve problems, to create an atmosphere of fairness. Somebody ripped you off, you can go there and solve the problem. They send you to the court. That's what the courts are supposed to be for. What they're for now is, hey, let's fill our pockets. They become retail stores, essentially, under the CRIS system. So that's just a complete abomination of what a court's supposed to do. Okay? So this political authority is a sovereignty, and he or they who are invested with it are the sovereign. Invested with it means you voted them in. It is evident that by the very act of the civil or political association, each citizen subjects himself to the authority of the entire body and everything that relates to the common welfare. It's a contract, folks. You agreed to the contract. Let's not try to take over and come in and screw things up, because the second you do and the second you try to dominate, you wipe out the contract. You get it? So the people that say, oh, well, he's a dictator, when I'm literally just going by the contract, and they don't like that because they have to go by their word. They don't like that either. So that always turns into Keith's a dictator when I'm going by the contract. Hey, we all agreed upon this, and I'm going to enforce this. Okay? We all agreed upon it. So you're not going to come here and start changing it to try to take advantage of everybody else. That's what usually happens. Okay? So it is evident that by the very act of the civil and political association, each citizen subjects himself to the authority of the entire body in everything that relates to the common welfare. So if it helps everybody, why not? The authority of all over, the authority of all over each member, therefore, essentially belongs to the body politic or state. So the authority of all over each member, therefore, essentially belongs to the body politic or state. There you go. Different reading, different understanding. Difficult to impart, believe me. The exercise of that authority may be placed in different hands according to the society may have ordained it. So, if the body of the nation keeps in its own hands the empire or the right to command, it is a popular government, a democracy. If it entrusts it to a certain number of citizens, to a senate, it establishes an aristocratic republic. And that's what they try to play like they have now up in Washington, D.C., which they don't even have that because they don't have a social compact. Nobody's ever seen one. They try to make out like they're one. You'll hear them every once in a while, especially when we bring this up. Then you'll start seeing agents trying to make up stuff, and they'll say, "Oh, it's our social contract." You know, they'll be in the front of Congress. Well, our social contract dictates. I said, "Lady, I remember there was one cop that was doing this. Lady, there's no social contract. I'm sorry, nobody gets it. The rules change every day. Depends on they change as the stock market changes." Okay, so don't tell me that there's a social contract, because there's not. You're full of it. And finally, if it confides the government to a single person, the state becomes a monarchy. So these three kinds of government may be variously combined and modified. We shall not here enter into the particulars. This subject belonging to the public universal law. Okay, so we shall not enter into the particulars. This subject belonging to the public universal law. Your social compact. And later on, it does talk about a social compact in the word social compact. But it talks about this through the whole thing. It says, for the object of the present work, let's move on down here. These are all just footers. It is sufficient to establish the general principles necessary for the decision of those disputes that may arise between nations. All of a sudden, it just moved from the social compact and then boom, right to nations. Every nation that governs itself under what form soever, without dependence on any foreign power, is a sovereign state. Its rights are naturally the same as those of any other state. Such are the moral persons who live together in a natural society, subject to the law of nations. To give a nation the right to make an immediate figure in this grand society, it is sufficient that it be really sovereign and independent. That is, govern itself by its own authority and laws. Okay? To give a nation a right to make an immediate figure in this grand society, it is sufficient that it be really sovereign and independent. That is, this is what sovereignty and independence is. That is, that it governs itself by its own authority and laws. We ought therefore to account as sovereign states those which have united themselves to another more powerful by an unequal alliance. So we ought therefore to account as sovereign states those which have united themselves to another more powerful by an unequal alliance, in which, as Aristotle says, to the more powerful is given more honor, and to the weaker more assistance. So the conditions of those unequal alliances may be definitely varied. But whatever they are, provided the inferior ally reserve to itself the sovereignty or the right of governing its own body, it ought to be considered as an independent state that keeps up an intercourse which others under the authority of the law of nations, with others under the authority of the law of nations. So what happens when you agree to the law of nations? The law of nations essentially between the countries becomes the sovereign, because every country exists by it. So you have two separate points of authority. All right, so you have one, which is the social compact, which doesn't exist in this country except with the government of the United States of America and those within the American National Union and the States of the Union. The U.S. doesn't have them. That's the authority. That is what everybody agreed upon. We're not going to go past all this. Okay, and then you have, when you have formed your state and your country, then you have the law of nations, which is the agreements and those things you subject your governments to within the law of nations on how you're going to treat other states. So then, in fact, it becomes a international social compact by and between the countries. Say, this is what we're going to do. So the United Nations comes in and they try to fulfill this agreement, and it's completely wrong the way that they've done it. They said that, the Charter of the United Nations, which they made a basic a club out of, and it's basically nothing more than a rich man's club. If you don't have enough money, they're not going to let you in. It's real simple. Has completely derogated from the basic principles of the law of nations, even though they claim that the Charter of the United Nations is an extension of the law of nations, which nobody asked them to write. The law of nations was sufficient, highly sufficient to do what it needed to do. So you see, what's happened is they've taken an idea of the law of nations and the way nations talk to themselves or talk to each other, and these are the agreements that we're going to agree upon in our daily intercourse, commercial intercourse, and other reasons to operate. And they said, oh, well, we're going to create a United Nations that does the exact opposite. So now you have chaos. That's exactly what's happening. So, and this is what they're talking about here. All right. Consequently, a weak state, which in order to provide for its safety, places itself under the protection of a more powerful one, and engages in return to perform several offices equivalent to that protection, without, however, divesting itself in the right of government and sovereignty, that state. Now, yeah, I say does not on this account cease to rank among the sovereigns who acknowledge no other law than that of nations. So there occurs no greater difficulty with respect to the tributary states, tributary, okay, tributary. For though the payment of tribute to the foreign power does in some degree diminish the dignity of those states from its being a confession to their weakness, but it suffers their sovereignties to subsist entire. So basically, what we could do with this is a degree diminish the dignity. Instead of calling it tribute, why don't you just call it here's the bill, okay? And say this is what it costs to protect you. So if you guys could pay this, it'd be really nice if you did that. Don't diminish them and humiliate them. Just say, hey, this is the bill. So you can apportion this bill out to among everybody within your what's called apportion taxes. You can apportion that amount out to everybody. It's a real cheap bill. You get it all paid, and everybody's good. All right. Instead, they like to call it tribute. So they you get this idea of a king sitting there, and they coming in. We have brought this for you and this for you, and here's my daughter. That's you can do her as you will, not do with do with her what you will. So that's a diminishing and a way of doing it, calling it tribute. Okay, that's also involves a religious aspect of this because people are going to say, look, we don't pay tribute to any man, we pay tribute to the Most High in heaven. Okay, so if they could, that's just my opinion on this, and I think it fits, and I think it would be better done if we didn't call it tribute. Yet it suffers their sovereignty to subsist entire. So the custom of paying tribute was formerly very common. The weaker by that means purchasing of their more powerful neighbor an exemption from oppression, or that of a price securing his protection without ceasing to be sovereigns. The Germanic nations introduced another custom, that of requiring homage from a state in either vanquished or too weak to make resistance. So sometimes even a prince has given sovereignties in fee. The sovereigns have voluntarily rendered themselves feudatories, feudatories to others. Feudal system is what it comes into. When the homage leaves independency and sovereign authority in the administration of the state, they only mean certain duties to the lord of the fee, or even mere honorary acknowledgement. Okay, it does not prevent the state from, or a feudatory prince, to be being strictly sovereign. The king of Naples pays homage for his kingdom to the Pope, and nevertheless reckoned among the principal sovereigns of Europe, which, by the way, was a violation of Chapter 12 of this Law of Nations, because the Pope likes to come in and get into people's business really bad. You don't ever want to ask for his protection. There's also this other thing. You can bring it to NATO, okay? Let me go ahead and mark that. You can bring it to NATO, and what was happening is that the people here in America were paying for all these other nations' protection instead of those nations paying their share. And then they started acting like they were over and above, they were under that protection, then started coming back and trying to tell us what to do, or telling the people that were protecting them what to do, as if they had the authority to do that, instead of saying, here, we're going to pay our share here, and we're going to move on like nothing happened. And then everybody, the rest of the world, say, okay, we're under the protection of the U.S. military. That's not us meaning. You understand what I'm saying? So what they were saying was, what I'm saying is the government of the United States of America and the U.S. military, two separate things. That's what I mean. All right. So they came back, and that's what Trump was talking about. He's saying, look, you guys got to start paying this. We're not going to sit here and pay all this crap. And this is what he's saying. We're not going to pay all this stuff for you guys to be protected, and you coming back and criticizing us. What the hell are you doing? Criticism, great, wonderful. Keep it to your damn self, because we're protecting you until you guys get your crap together, basically. Instead, they were sitting on it, doing nothing to protect themselves, and then coming back and acting like they can criticize and trying to change the political structure of the U.S. or the perceived political structure that direction. Body politic hasn't been created, right? There's no social compact. So we can't necessarily say that the U.S. has a political structure. It just has a couple of political parties that are 527 private companies. By the way, which we did find the Republican bylaws of their association. It means they're private. Two sovereign states may also be subject to the same prince without any dependence on each other, and each may retain all its rights as a free and sovereign state. The King of Prussia is sovereign prince of Neufchâtel, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in Switzerland, without that principality being in any manner united to his other dominions, so that the people of Neufchâtel, in virtue of their franchises, may serve a foreign power at war with the King of Prussia, provided that the war be not on account of that principality. Okay, so they can't really, fight that principality and then expect that principality to protect them. And then the other guy that's under their protection, but a separate protection, don't start coming and going, like making an ally with that enemy that's fighting us against us. We're going to plummet you both. All right. Finally, several sovereign and independent states may unite themselves together by a perpetual confederacy. Okay, that was where, look at it, folks. This is where they got the original 1871 idea of a perpetual confederacy, which we have turned it into a republic and completely restructured the union to where it works for everybody, where the people have their independence. So what we're trying to do is the government of the United States of America is made up of general postmasters. The rest it recognizes the American nationals and it recognizes the residents, but it does not subject them to this government. What we're waiting on is the residents and American nationals to possibly listen to this series and learn how to run a state where they can go in and take their independent states that are sitting in trust with the government of the United States of America and run those states by having their elections and turning it into where the empire is in the hands of the people and not in the hands of an oligarch or aristocracy. I'm sorry, republic or a monarch. So we had 15 of them set up, and there was only 4 people in there, and we were waiting for other people to assemble and then register their assembly with that national government, and then they could start having their elections. And they would have had their state. It's right there, but it's sitting in trust right now. That's how close you are to every bit of this. And every time we get going, there's gurus out there that try to stop it because they like their fiefdoms, and their fiefdoms are letting them get money. They're charging them money and all that kind of stuff. And they're living off of them, off of the people, which is what we're not doing. Okay? Now, without ceasing to be each individually a perfect state. Now, they will together constitute a federal republic. Their joint deliberations will not impair the sovereignty of each member, though they may, in certain respects, put some restraint on the exercise of it in virtue of voluntary engagements. A person does not cease to be free and independent when he is obliged to fulfill engagements which he has voluntarily contracted. Okay, so I'll read that again. Finally, several sovereign and independent states may unite themselves together by a perpetual confederacy without ceasing to be each individually a perfect state. Well, they've done that here because they got rid of their money. And this is why we have to rebuild this. They've gotten rid of their money, so the states were supposed to be able to mint and mint their own coin, and they stopped doing that. They gave that to a private organization. It's been ripping everybody off ever since. They will together constitute a federal republic. Their joint deliberations will not impair the sovereignty of each member. Okay, though they may, in certain respects, put some restraint on the exercise of it in virtue of voluntary engagements. A person does not cease to be free and independent when it is obliged to fulfill engagements which he has voluntarily contracted. So what we did was we will together constitute a federal republic. That is through the General Post Office. All right. So the way we operate is the General Post Office is the communications center for every state. Now, people in one state don't speak like people in another state. The people from New York don't speak like the people from Alabama. And they have a completely different dialect, a completely different understanding of the world. So you're going to need in this country is communications. That's what you're going to need. I'm talking about a really good communication system because people just don't understand each other. It was amazing to actually watch. Okay, folks, I stopped the recording, and then I walked away for a minute and came back because I see an opportunity here, and I want to explain this opportunity. It's going to be the last part of this particular show, part 2 of 167. I stopped at 167. I'm going to keep doing part 2, part 3, part 4, going over the law of nations. And what I'm saying here is this. Finally, several sovereign and independent states may unite themselves together by perpetual confederacy without ceasing to be each individually a perfect state. They will together constitute a federal republic, which is what you guys are trying to get back, right? This is what you think you're trying to get back. I'm going to show you where your mistakes are based on this whole deal. Their joint deliberations will not impair the sovereignty of each member, though they may, in certain respects, put some restraint on the exercise of it in virtue of voluntary engagements. Okay, so they're not pushing things. A person does not cease to be free and independent when he is obliged to fulfill engagements which has voluntarily contracted. Such were formerly the cities of Greece. Such are at present the 7 united provinces of the Netherlands, and such the members of the Helvetic body. Now, keep in mind, that was back in 1700. So that's when they had the 7 united provinces of the Netherlands. So apparently this idea was coming from, or the Netherlands adopted it also. So what you have here is a major problem because they unite themselves together by a perpetual confederacy. The problem is they had a completely different constitution and they abandoned the confederacy. Then, to top that off, the document that was supposed to unite them together started offering citizenship of its own as if it was its own country. And began to compete with the states, or all the states that came together that made up that body, supposedly. We're talking about the Constitution now. Constitution was created in private and signed in private. It was never ratified by the people, and they never voted on it, because if they had, it would have been shot down in a heartbeat, because they were shooting it down before it started. Okay? So what happened was this. You don't have and never had a federal republic that was created under a constitution of the United States. A federal republic was created under the Articles of Confederation. And the bankers within Manhattan Island that created their Bank of New York under a federal republic, under the Articles of Confederation, turned around and used that power to destroy it and create I think it was an oligarchy, giving all their power to a Senate and all this crap, aristocratic a republic, sorry, my fault, aristocratic republic for themselves. So the Senate represents the banks. Then come up with this citizen of the United States crap and all this other jazz, which was not a federal republic. They just told you it was, so that you wouldn't fight it or try to kill them for destroying your federal republic under a perpetual confederacy of 1871. It was never to have its own constitution and its own citizenship. So you see, folks, finally, several sovereign and independent states may unite themselves together by a perpetual confederacy without ceasing to be each individually a perfect state, meaning those people within that state, didn't want anything. They didn't want for anything. They were perfectly content with how they were. They didn't want for anything else. Okay? Now, they will together constitute a federal republic. That's all the states coming together. Not create a citizenship of its own. What the hell's that? Then they created their own court and their own everything. And then tried to subject the rest of the states to it. And that's where they went wrong. And it was so bad that during the Civil War, they actually, the United States itself conquered through war and have been occupying it through military occupation since the Civil War. And this is what we're trying to fix. And once again, we're being attacked by the same type of people. It's so bad that even the people that were coming in that were saying they were trying to do it, they were attacking this our government and trying to take it over. When they had no idea they have never even read the Law of Nations. They had no idea how to even create a country. And they're coming in by vote and trying to take it over, which was hilarious, by the way. So we made it to where, okay, we'll all come together and we're going to make this to where only general postmasters can join the government of the United States of America. All the rest go over to the other union, and you have got 50 states of your own. And we will all unite under the charter of the American continent, which we already have in place. And it's a simple charter. It has no power other than to, under the law of nations, resolve problems between states. How is that? It's what they call a basic generic document under the law of nations. This is how it's set up. You know, we have the all that. And what you have right now is a constant perpetual fight, because first of all, you have a state flag, and you never fly that state flag. You always fly the 50 state flag, so-called, under a completely separate constitution, which makes no damn sense whatsoever. So are you allegiant to the state, or are you allegiance to something where the states are all supposed to come together and call it a federal republic? And then you're saying, well, we want a federal republic, but you're trying to do it under a constitution that offers citizenship? It's madness. It's absolutely ridiculous. So what do you want? An aristocratic republic or a democracy? Because some people are saying both. You can't have both. Either the power rests with the Senate or it rests with the people. Which one do you want? Pick it, because you can't have both. An aristocratic republic? A federal republic? What the hell, guys? What are you doing? We can't figure it out. Because we keep saying, man, they keep just really pushing on that Constitution. They don't want to let that go. Well, I want my 10 amendments, you know. I want my Second Amendment. And then the states come in and say, well, yeah, none of them seem to have adopted the Second Amendment. And they're acting like they're independent from this other constitution, which in fact they are. But the people keep saying that we're U.S. citizens. Or are you a citizen of that state, or a U.S.? What the hell? Nothing makes any sense. Nothing makes any sense. So we do have a federal republic within the United States of America. And it's all under the charter and all under the law of nations, where it's supposed to be. Where you have nations that all come together under their own constitutions. They're all set up to where they have their own politics, their own body. In other words, they have their own political party. We have different chapters of the political party in each state. The way we have it set up, the people vote for their own people. And then when it comes to governor, they all operate, and they have one delegate that goes to the charter of the American continent, and that charter can even be attended by people, the Americans in Mexico. Believe it or not, Mexicans are Americans, and all the South, Central, and North American states can join under that particular charter, which the OAS was supposed to do. The Organization of American States. They were supposed to do that, but they never got it done. They never invited the states to come in. So I'm asking everybody here, why are you dealing with two separate constitutions? What is wrong with you? One is supposed to be a charter under the United Nations. First of all, you have a charter that organizes you, and or a charter of I'm sorry, the Charter of the American Continent under the Law of Nations. My fault, not the United Nations. And you're supposed to settle problems under being subjected to or subjecting yourselves to the law of nations, which has already been written. So why create a United Nations? No reason for it. We already have the law of nations. Why have a federal constitution when we already have 50 states with 50 different governments in them, over 3,000 local governments? Really? How many governments you need, guys? Every county has its own government. Then you have a state government. Then it's all supposed to be run by some federal foreign government under Salonon versus Farley that has its own citizens, U.S. citizens. Then when you make them U.S. citizens, then they're foreigners to their own state as a perpetual residency, and then become a military occupation within their own state themselves. So essentially, U.S. citizens have become a military occupation in the very state that they were born in, as foreigners to that state, under Section 213 of this book. Do you see how much is in this book that people need to know? Does everyone get it? So you can't have it both ways, folks. So we set up a federal republic. It's what we did. Right now, it's in its transition form because we're trying to educate people to run a state. And it's very difficult to do because they don't know how to do it. And I understand that. And we're being really patient. We're not yelling at them. We're not trying to push them. We're saying, okay, I'll tell you what, you start your own business, you learn how to run your own business, then you can supply a national government with your products and things. They can't even supply a pen with them now. A pen's, paper and stuff. They don't produce paper. So somebody needs to start a paper company. And, furniture and all this other kind of stuff, plus a building. So all these things need to be furnished. And we've got a military occupation being set up by U.S. citizens, by the way. They were set up that way. They don't know it, but that's what they're doing because they never read the book. And don't know what a federal republic is. They think they know what it is, but they don't. As you can see, and has been displayed here. And so we're waiting on that. And then, that takes time. So that takes about 3 to 5 years to get people to really understand what's going on and say, okay, we're ready to go ahead and get our states going. We got assemblies going in our states. Those assemblies have registered with our national government. It's not registered, but recorded themselves, recorded their existence. It's been published in the newspaper that they exist. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and have elections. And we're saying, great, this is the government of the United States of America. We have to keep one intact that everybody knows what's going on. So we've kept that one intact and became an equal partner, an actual equal member in and under the Charter of the American Continent. That charter. As the equal voting member. As the communications hub for that charter. The general postmasters run messages back and forth. Not a bad setup. We always keep communications open. And we keep the fights down. And the arguments and the misunderstandings and the egos and all that kind of crap that goes on with human beings. That's what you're going to get. And the United States is even welcome under their constitution to join as a member, a separate member, excuse me, and admitting the fact that they're a separate country and they need to stop interfering in pulling resources from the states. So that's how it is, folks. And I hope you really enjoyed this as this particular part two as much as I enjoyed explaining it to you. Seriously, I did enjoy this one because I think with this understanding, we can all come to a point where we're going to understand each other and what the problems are, because this little bit of information has been lost, and the miscommunication of the simple word want and what that means and what perfection and imperfection means. It's awesome stuff. I love talking about it. That's what I love talking about, and deliberating over, and discussing and debating and all those things to get this thing fixed, because we can fix it and we can do it. We can do it, folks. We can do it. If we can do it with the 3,000 people, we can do it with 3 million people, and we can do it with 50 million and 320 million. We can do this. We just have to have the basic understanding and the basics of the world and how things operate and how they communicate with each other. And that's what we have to have as general postmasters, to help general postmasters understand how states communicate with each other. And don't look at it as people. And this state's going to speak Spanish, and this state's going to speak English. And we got to get interpreters in there and help each other understand each other. And we can do that. They don't have to be shoved together under this religion called diversity. They just have to understand each other and get along without killing each other. And that's what it all turns into. Thank you for listening to the 167th broadcast, part 2 of the T-ROH show. And we will see you next week. Or, I'm sorry, maybe in a couple of days. Just depends if I have time. I'll see you. If not, it'll be next week.